Tom, welcome back to the Wade Champions podcast. It's been a lot of years since you've been on here, and it's great to have you back on
Yeah, I know we're two OGs, aren't we?
with OGs, man. And you know what's fun is we got to spend a lot of time together, first working for International Ice Hockey Federation in France, and then both got this sort of last minute-ish call to go to Washington, D.C. and talk to Congress. And so you and I have gotten the chance to have a lot of really cool conversations, I think, and I've gotten to hear your latest works, you speaking about it, and you mine. And so we agreed after France that we get you on the podcast, and then between scheduling you and it happening, we both got to go to DC. So
That's
it's
right. The
cool.
federal government decided to care, at least Congress did, or a subcommittee did.
A subcommittee did. It was interesting, wasn't it? Like to, because I know I reached out to you when I heard you were on. I was like, "Have you done this before?" Um, and you're like, "Nope, I haven't done it before." Because I was like, "What? Do I wear a suit? What do I do?" So that was fun.
I know. I should have told you to wear a Oregon Ducks mascot uniform.
Well, the ranking member was from Oregon, so she probably would have appreciated that. So.
That would have been good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what did you think? You and I were talking before we hit record here about just for me, since I did that, I've had so many people reach out and say, "How can we help? How can we get involved?" Saw that testimony, saw this thing. What about for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's so easy to be cynical about Congress these days. We see these major national challenges, shared challenges that we have, and a lot of times you just can't get things done.
Mhm.
It just gets so tribal so quickly. People lock down on their ideas, and it's unfortunate. But I'll tell you what, that day, John, longtime Hill watchers who helped prep me for the event and guided me through it, and other folks said this was different. And this was different for a couple different reasons. Number one, there was no specific piece of legislation that was on the table that people were trying to argue against or for. They simply wanted to be educated. Okay.
Mhm.
Number two, the members showed up. So unless you know how Congress works, a lot of hearings get called, and there might be just a couple members, several members who show up and ask questions. We had a lot of people, John,
Then that
show
was
up.
that was cool. Like I didn't know that either. I just figured, well, that's your job, so of course you show up. But yeah, when everyone's like, "Wow, there's a lot of people here showed up to this," I thought it was cool.
Yeah, and came at a time. I don't know if you knew this, but it was when an emergency closed door briefing was being introduced on the Venezuelan boat attack situation.
I did know that.
So
Yeah.
there was some concern that, well, we're going to get anybody to show up, and maybe we need to cut this hearing short because there's going to be a lack of interest. But just the opposite happened. It ran the full 2 hours, and a lot of people showed up. And I don't know about you, but I thought they asked good questions. I thought they were, I mean, it was a little bit of political posturing, a little bit of tribal stuff, but I think people were authentically on both sides of the aisle, cared about this issue, understood it kind of in their bones because they got kids in the system, they've seen it, it's personal, and they have a feeling like something's wrong here. There's just too much pressure and too much money that is descending on an American institution that all of us have benefited from, and we need to preserve today, given our mental health crisis, our physical health crisis, military readiness, strong communities, healthcare costs, all of it. So I thought it was good. I thought the questions were good. I thought they were authentic. I thought they want to learn, and hopefully they want to get something done.
Well, I thought what was, there's not many common enemies in politics these days, but
Mm.
maybe private equity is one of them in on some level, right? And so there seemed to be a lot really coming from this idea of if all of a sudden youth sports is a business and if private equity is involved, then that business has its responsibility to its shareholders is to make money, not
Right.
necessarily to serve children. This is a problem. And I think that's where you saw people from both sides saying, really, youth sports as well? Like, isn't there anything free from this idea of extract as much profit and turn everything into a commodity?
Yeah, but of course that's not the case. I mean,
Right.
as we've made the point within our research, there is more money flowing through youth sports than the NFL.
Yeah.
There's more money flowing through the it's probably the NFL and college sports combined. More
Yeah.
money is flowing through. It's more north of $40 billion alone is spent by parents.
Yeah.
So of course private equity is going to get in the space.
Right.
It's a big messy space. They're going to try and organize a little better, try and wring some profit out of it. Maybe they'll bring some efficiencies. Maybe they'll bring some innovation. Maybe they'll bring some professionalism. I don't think private equity is all necessarily bad,
Hmm.
or at least automatically bad. But it does not surprise me in the least that we have private equity in this space thinking about how to make a buck.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I know you, Chris Snyder used to work for the USOPC, and we did a project together with you guys and USOPC and the How to Coach Kids years and years ago. And
Yep.
Chris, when he left the USOPC, went and worked in a private multi-sport club business and everything that then got bought out.
Mhm.
And then they eventually bought him out, and they eliminated his position as director of coach development for a youth sports national youth sports organization, and they put the budget into marketing,
Yeah.
right? And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. And he's like, that it's like they want bodies in the door, and they're accepting that people are going to walk out the back door. And what you're doing and what we're doing, changing the game project, and this idea of like 63-30, your initiative that I want you to talk about, we're
Mhm.
trying to keep people in sports because we know all the benefits and things
Mhm.
like that. So maybe talk about 63-30, but also this idea of why does it matter? Why does it matter that our kids play sports? Why can't they just play video games and be just fine?
Yeah. So the research is really clear now, John. When you and I got started in it, there were pieces of research that suggested youth sports are good. We kind of knew in our bones it can produce positive things. That now there's stacks and stacks and stacks of research demonstrating the value proposition. And it's all sized up in one particular infographic that we have called
Mhm.
Active Kids Do Better in Life.
Yeah,
And they
which
do.
is wonderful. I
It,
love that infographic. I've
it's
showed it at talks. It's just so easy to be like, oh yeah, duh.
That's it right there. Okay, yeah. I mean, look, kids who are physically active are one-tenth of likely to be obese. They're more likely to stay in school. They're less likely to use drugs. They're more likely to binge drink. So not all the data is good, but it's mostly good.
Mhm.
They're more likely to stay in school. They're more likely to go to college. Um, less likely to suffer a range of chronic diseases as they get older, including 13 types of cancer.
Mhm.
They're more likely to be active parents, and active mothers are twice as likely to have active kids. So this incredibly virtuous cycle can be unlocked if we
Mhm.
can simply get kids off the couch without, as you can appreciate, running them into the ground,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So if we could do it the right way, and I think people get it, and you see this infographic, and you're like, oh, okay, I see how sport can actually begin to address a range of topics, a range of issues that we talk about in the larger society. Everything from mental health crisis to social isolation to obesity to military readiness to just strong, cohesive communities, bringing down national GDP costs related to healthcare, on and on and on. I mean, the value proposition is there. And that's why the federal government actually has decided to care about it. In 2016, through the National Children's Health Survey, which is administered by the U.S. Census Bureau, they added a question to that survey about whether your child played on a team in the past year or took lessons after school or on weekends. Okay, so a large, survey sample, enough to break it down by state and 26 different subgroups. And the bottom line is when they baselined it back in 2016, there were about 58% of kids who were playing sports.
Hmm.
Okay, who
Hmm.
parents who answered the question positively. Fell down to about 56% just prior to the pandemic, fell all the way down to 49% during the pandemic. We came out of the pandemic and jumped back up to 51, 52%, and we are back up to about 55%
Hmm.
as of 2023. That's the latest data that we have. And that's good. That means we've recovered largely from the pandemic, but we're still behind where we were a decade ago.
Hmm.
And while we don't have apples to apples data, I think we're probably behind where we were 2 decades ago,
Hmm.
when sport were just not as expensive or as pressure filled as they've never been perfect, but as pressure filled as it is right now. So our 63 by 30 initiative is saying, well, all right. I mean, if we were 49, which we started thinking about this, and 51%, how do we get to 63%? Because the federal government not only is collecting data about where we are, they also set a target through
Hmm.
something called Healthy People 2030, which are the nation's public health goals.
Hmm.
And the target that is set by the year 2030 is that 63.3% of children will be playing on a team, basically answering that question in the affirmative.
Hmm.
But the federal government, and the government is not going to alone, certainly alone, get this done. It's got to be the private sector. It's got to be the philanthropic sector. It's got to be the nonprofits rallying around this goal. And that's what we've done in our program. Within Project Play, we said, look, can we focus on 63%? What more can you do in an aligned way to get and keep more kids playing sports so we can all tell this story that's going to benefit every stakeholder in the landscape, not the least of which are our children. So that is what we call 63 by 30. That's our
63,
63
right?
by 30 national roundtable of leading organizations that's leading the call to action. But it's meant to be to reverberate throughout the ecosystem.
Yeah, and I remember years ago at one of your first Project Play national gatherings, you had the Surgeon General Vivek
Vivek Murthy.
Murthy, yeah.
Hmm.
And I think at that thing he was talking about like if we start hitting some of these benchmarks of activity, the cost savings to our federal government and to our state governments is in the billions and billions of dollars from better health outcomes and less hospitalizations and medications and all these sort of things. It's
Yeah.
like we need the way we save money 10 years from now is what we do today. But sadly, most politics works in like, I need to see it today or it didn't really happen.
Yeah, yeah, and the folks who are going to derive the largest benefit of that are not the ones who are investing in creating a better sports system. So, I mean,
Correct.
we've done that when we launched 63 by 30. We worked with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and several universities to kind of say, okay, well, if we move it from 51% to 63%,
Right.
what will be the downstream benefits? And yeah, it's $80 billion minimum in direct medical costs saved and worker productivity gains. Mental health improves, and about 1.8. Shoot, I'm going to get my own numbers right here.
Yeah, yeah.
Many, many millions of quality years of life will be saved because kids were physically active early, and as they moved into adulthood, they're more likely to be active.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's there. It's there. All these industry or society will benefit in very obvious, significant ways.
Yeah. And I think we spend a lot of attention on, let's just call it the higher end of youth sports, these expensive club travel things that are
Mhm.
promising the scholarship at the end of it. But really sports, this can happen at the grassroots level. And it's like how does that happen? Um, so that these intro to sporting programs are funded by communities in a way that they can train some coaches and have the facilities to create great programs. Now, just this morning, I had breakfast with a friend who works in, another sort of city in Oregon that has a
Mhm.
very ethnically and economically diverse population, and he's just telling me about like, they try to pass a tax levy so their youth sports rec program could continue going, and it was defeated handily, right? And he's like, I don't even know if there's going to be funding for my job a year from now. Um, because a bunch of people who vote, well, I don't have kids, I don't get, why are you going to raise my taxes? And he's like, what do we do? And I'm like, well, I think if you canceled all your sports, maybe people would finally pay attention. But it's
Yeah.
just, and he's like, I don't live in a community where I can just raise the rec soccer fees to $160. Like, people can't afford that. How do
Mm,
I skin that? And so I think this is where, you know, we can have the biggest impact, that if we have these town leagues
yeah.
and low cost, and we don't need a $200 uniform, get them a t-shirt,
Mm.
train some coaches. I mean, that's where I think we can really make the difference.
Yeah, I think so. That's right, and it's really unfortunate that that local levy didn't pass. Because our research shows, there was a survey that we helped the Olympic Reform Commission a few years ago put into the field, and they
Hmm.
asked Americans, which level of sport would you be most comfortable using public dollars on?
Hmm.
And it was like less than 10% for professional sports and less than 10% for college sports, less than 10% for Olympic sports. It might have been like 14% or something for Paralympic sport. The only one that in the mind of Americans that merited public dollars, and it was like 51, 52% was youth and school sports.
Isn't
So
that
people
interesting,
people
right?
yeah, people do. I think people are willing to pay for it. You gotta tee it up. Again, I don't know the specifics around this particular levy, but I mean people get it. People understand the value. They want their kids to be active. They want them doing things other than sitting on the couch, and they're willing to invest in it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah,
hope
I mean,
that I
much
hope
more
that case
so
is
than
won.
like, oh, let's fund a stadium for the billionaire, you know,
Right.
like,
Right. Which is usually what happens.
which is where the money goes, right? For 8 games a year and some concerts or whatever, instead of no, like, how about, how many kids could we put on the field? And, or, talking, one of the things you talked about with Congress was, I don't know if it was the sports gambling tax and
Mhm.
investing that in facility building.
Mhm.
Am I remembering that
Yeah,
correctly?
okay. So yeah, and I think this is a real opportunity, John, I really think folks should rally around. Um, in 2018, sports betting was legalized by the Supreme Court. In the first year, there was less than $10 million that came in to the federal government
Hmm.
through excise taxes.
Hmm.
Okay. So the federal government made little under $10 million from sports betting being out there.
Hmm.
Well, now that number is uh, approaching $400 million. So it's grown exponentially and is going to continue to grow. So the question is, should we, I mean, should that money just go into the black hole that is the federal budget to pay for whatever? Or should this be one of those excise tax situations where the money stays within the sector to do something good with it?
Yeah.
So, and I've made this argument. I made this argument a few years ago because I looked at how Norway funds their sports system. Norwich, which we looked at a dozen leading sports systems in the world, how they're constructed, what their youth sport participation rates, athlete performance at the elite level, et cetera. And I mean, Norway, I think, is hands down the best, right?
And weren't they like it when you did that article, like 90% youth sport participation or some
Like
crazy high
90% of
number?
kids come through sport clubs there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
It's just what you do if you're a Norwegian kid.
Yeah.
Now, not all of them stay in these clubs, but they all come through these clubs in some form or another. And it's a nation of 5 million people, and yet they still finish atop the medal count. They may do it again here at Milan Cortina,
Yeah.
where this tiny nation the size of Minnesota beats everybody. I'm like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
And it's just they have a sports system there that is organized very well, and has a lot of community clubs, and those community clubs are paid for in part through monies that come from the federal government, which gets its money from it's called Norsk tipping. So it's basically gambling and
Hmm.
sports betting.
Hmm.
And so most of that money goes to sport, and most of the sport money goes not to the Olympic Committee or the NGBs, but actually out to communities. And this is how they create a good system there. This is
Yeah.
how they pay for that system. So I'm like, we got to do that. And the state of New York, when they were legalizing sports betting, someone saw an article I wrote about this and got it passed. So in New York, there is a cut of mobile sports betting that goes to fund youth sport programs for underprivileged communities, right?
Hmm.
And so, like, why can't we do something like this at the federal level? Why can't
Hmm.
we take that $400 million or some chunk of that $400 million and redirect it into youth sports. Maybe it goes to the Center for Safe Sport to pay for background checks and abuse training and things. I know it's been a problematic organization for a long
Hmm.
time, but like maybe it reduces the cost that all these grassroots organizations have to cover that. Maybe it could go toward access programs. Maybe it could go to coaching programs, all the stuff that you talk about
Yeah.
that we know needs to happen.
Yeah.
Uh, Maybe it could be used to pay for that. I think that'd be a great use of the sports betting money. I'm not advocating for sports betting, but I'm saying if we're going to do it, then let's use the money the right way.
Just like we put liquor taxes into rehab programs and, cigarette taxes into cancer research and whatever. It's like, yeah, like I thought when you said that, I was like, yeah, like there's a great idea. And there's something about for me facilities that sticks because that's such a problem, especially in underserved communities where, I remember one of your early conferences and I was there and Michelle Obama was there she was, just talking about, growing up in Chicago and like a lot of these courts and play parks don't even exist anymore. They're not safe to go to. But I think something like, when we say like, oh, let's give this to underserved communities, then you have so many layers that it passes through that there's more opportunities for fraud and waste and taking up my cut where it's like, hey, we're giving this to build a park. And at the end
Right.
of it, we want to see these fields and lights and basketball courts. And this amount of usage has to go to community programming, not private club programming, right? Like there's a very tangible thing that says this money created good in this community.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that idea.
Yeah, and you could use the sports betting excise tax money for that. You could keep it in there. This happens with like airports. Like, so I think, air travel and things like that, there's an excise tax.
Hmm.
It does, either I don't know the exact details on it, but I'm told that some chunk of that money, or maybe a large chunk, goes back into airport infrastructure and things.
Right.
So why can't this go back into sports infrastructure
Right.
in our country?
Yeah, amen, amen to that. I love that. Another thing, we you just touched on it, this idea of coach education, and you guys are part of the Million Coach Challenge with a bunch of organizations. How do we educate more coaches? And that was one of Project Play's original sort of goals, is like educate coaches because we know that when we train coaches, kids stay in sport. So an untrained coach is going to lose a lot more kids than someone who's trained. Most of those kids will come back. And yet we've burdened a lot of our let's call them grassroots coaches, youth coaches
Mhm.
with first aid, concussion training, safe sport training, all these sort of things. They could do 4 hours of training before you ever say, okay, here's how to coach basketball. Right.
Right. Right.
And this is the challenge. And a lot of people say, oh, well, they're volunteers. Like, how much more are we supposed to ask them? But if we don't teach them how to run an effective practice and how to connect with kids, those kids aren't coming back. I don't care how much concussion training you've done.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to get your thought on this, John. The way I look at the coaching environment right now, building off what you just said, is yeah, we want coaches to be trained in CPR, first aid, abuse prevention, concussion management, coaching girls, ACL injury prevention, literally on and on and on. There seem to be about 12 to 15 things we want all coaches trained in, but
Hmm.
it's offered up by 12 or 15 different organizations, or maybe 30 organizations on 30 different platforms.
Hmm.
And there's passwords and there's costs, and like it's just too much
Yeah.
for club administrators and even athletic directors in some case to really get their mind around.
Yeah.
And so how do we simplify this environment? How do we get like crystal clear on what a soccer coach of kids who are 6 to 8 years old needs to be trained in
Hmm.
versus a soccer coach of kids who are elite players who are 16 to 18? It might be different,
And
right?
and those coaches are pretty well served.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of high-end club coaches who are like, I don't know how to coach these kids. What do I do? Like they're very well served in those clubs run programs. It's really the grassroots. I'm coming for 3 months. What do I do?
Right.
that really need the most. And that point of entry is where kids walk away right away because they have a bad experience right away.
Yeah, yeah. And so we gotta hit them early. I mean, it's I don't know what you think about this idea, but I think like we just need to we need to create a solution for like entry level coaches. That's simple, that's coordinated, that's all in one box, and is a limited ask on their time, is n not ad nauseum.
Yeah.
And we just have someone pay for it. Do not ask these volunteer coaches to pay for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No,
maybe
we definitely.
maybe give them like an incentive. Maybe you get like a tax credit. This is where policy could be interesting. What if
Yeah.
there was like a $500 or $1,000 tax credit if you completed basic training and coaching each year?
Wow. Wow. Super cool, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and just do it. So that, yeah, there's at least something on the back end of all that time. Now, see, because I don't buy, and I've talked to you about this, right? My dad, who passed away this year, he was a volunteer firefighter for 57 years. When he
Mhm.
couldn't go to fires anymore, he taught firefighting, and then he just went to the firehouse and hung out, right? And he was never got paid anything for it.
Mhm.
He did get actually, now that you mention it, I wasn't thinking of this. By doing that, he did get like a village tax credit.
Okay.
So he got a little off his local taxes because of that thing. Not, and that's not why he did it. But the thing that I always think about, is people say, "Oh, they're volunteers. We can't ask too much." I was like, "What if our volunteer firefighters said that, right? What if your house was on fire, and the firefighter showed up and be like, 'Hey, didn't really go to learn how to use this hose.
Right.
Sucks for
Right.
you.'" Like, no, we expect them to be professionals. So
Yeah.
volunteerism is not an excuse for not training or for a lack of professionalism. That's where we can be better. So I love your idea of like, hey, if we gave like an estate could do this, right? Like, hey, in New York State, in Oregon, we're going to give you a credit on there if you train to be a coach and you give back to your community in that way. Brilliant,
Yeah.
right? Love it.
Yeah, I think so. We got to figure it out. I mean, coaching's so important. Coaches are they're not the gatekeepers. It's parents who are the gatekeepers. They're the ones who sign up their kids, but it is the coach who is the dominant figure in whether a kid returns or not. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and
Mm-hmm.
once a kid has a bad experience, my observation is like they're done. They're often done with that sport
Forever. Forever. I
forever,
mean,
which is
those,
so unfortunate. So
yeah.
we gotta somehow move to like a yeah, we got to organize the environment. We got to create incentives in the environment for coaches to be trained. Tax credits are just one way to do it. There are other ways to other incentives. And as appropriate, we need to have the conversation around mandates. And we also need to reposition. I actually don't buy the idea that if we ask coaches to volunteers to get trained in something, they're just not going to volunteer at all. I don't
Right.
think that's the case. USA Hockey went down this path 15 years ago when they introduced ADM and
Mm-hmm.
began asking more of their coaches, and they didn't see a drop off.
Mm-mm.
They actually saw coaches enter the space saying, "Oh, okay, all right, I now you've given me the tools and the confidence to do what I'm going to do."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I had this guy years ago on the podcast named Nate Baldwin, and he was the
yep.
sports director in Appleton, Wisconsin, and wrote an article about it and everything because they really made when he took over, they mandated coach education, mandated parent education, coalesced around, some values for the organization. He's like, we didn't want to be the thing that people settled for. We wanted to be something that people chose to do because it gave them dinners back and family balance. And he's like, their retention rate, like I just always remember this thing. He's like, my first year we had, you know, 80 soccer teams and I had to dial for dollars for like 68 coaches, right? I had like, 12 people volunteer to coach and 68 teams. I had to be like, Tom, if you don't coach, we don't have a team, right? He goes, 4 years later, we had 123 teams and I only had to find 20 coaches or something,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
The
yeah.
coaches came back because we gave them resources and tools and whatever, and we increased our player retention and we grew our programming. Um, but it's funny. Nate eventually lost his job because they had too many kids playing sports and they wouldn't hire more staff.
Right.
So they got rid of
Mm.
the guy who was getting all the kids to play sports, you know. So it's so funny, man. What do you what do you I mean, we've talked about some of these. Are there any other big challenges that you see? Like, or is there like around parent education for how do we convince them that, you don't have to be on the travel team at 7 years old?
Yeah, John, I like you, I've been talking about the challenges for a long time. I'm more intensely focused on solutions
Yeah.
right now and what's working in the environment to address the the, the challenges, the problems that I think you and I and a lot of people now are really crystal clear about. And so one of the real breakthrough models that has excited me is in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Are you familiar with Cambridge Youth Soccer Association by any chance?
No, go ahead, tell the story.
This is interesting, right? Okay, and you'll appreciate this as a soccer coach, right? So what's the way soccer is structured in this country? You got the rec league teams, right? 5, 6, 7 years old. Then you create the travel teams, and once you create the travel teams, then it pulls away bodies from the rec league. The rec league begins to wither. Coaches pull away, and like in my little town in Connecticut, 15 years ago, there really was no rec league opportunity after fifth grade. It
Hmm.
was travel. You caught the bullet train early, or your kid was out, had no chance to even play in high school. Suboptimal. But like, what are you going to do as a parent? Like, that's what your only option is, it seems like. Um, and so the town of Cambridge, Massachusetts saw what was happening, all across New England, where I raised our kids. And I was like, you know what? We want to disrupt this model.
Hmm.
And so we're going to still allow travel teams. We're
Hmm.
going to create them at the, whatever fifth grade or something at the earlier ages. But we're going to ask any kid who plays travel to also play rec.
Hmm.
So they mandated that you split time between a rec team and a travel team through Cambridge Youth Soccer Association, which
Hmm.
has control of the fields in
Hmm.
in Cambridge,
Hmm.
right? And they did a lot of other things right as well. Small-sided play, really worked really hard on getting coaches trained, had a very clear code of conduct. Uniforms, like they moved to country names, and some of those country names were of communities, refugee communities in Cambridge, which actually
Hmm.
has like 30% or so of kids free and reduced lunch.
Hmm.
Um, they held off on the registration deadline until like literally I think it was like the first day of the season you could sign up. So the
Yeah.
lower income families sometimes were just to make room for the not so great, the active
Yeah.
parents out there. But the thing I think the game changer was saying no, we want you to play city league through eighth grade.
Hmm.
And people are like, oh my gosh, my kids could be left behind. There was some of that angst of like, this isn't going to work. But you know what, John? It worked. And
Hmm.
their registration has gone through the roof since then. It's probably doubled, I want to say, to more than 2,000 kids playing
Hmm.
in their program.
Hmm.
And it turns out that kids want to play with their classmates.
Yeah. And be the
And
star of their team with their classmates because maybe on their travel team they're the 12th best player.
right,
Hmm.
exactly. And so it's a lower, and they've kept the cost down on the thing. And the parents, the wealthier parents in town, are so appreciative of a model that kind of makes sense, is saner than
Hmm.
what they're presented with in every other town. That apparently they, have a little donation button at the start of the year, and they donate all this money, and that covers the cost of a lot of the lower income kids.
Mm.
So like I'm like, wow, okay, that's a breakthrough model. When we talk about like preventing attrition, like don't this the fundamental problem with youth sports in this country, the fundamental flaw is that we sort the weak from the strong
Way
before they
too
grow
young.
into their bodies, minds, and interests.
Hmm.
We're doing this in sixth and seventh and eighth grade and just like push aside so many kids. And then those who stay in the system at some point often get burned out or demotivated or too injured or whatever else it may be. And it seems to me that Cambridge has figured something out. And you know what? Any town can do this. You don't need federal legislation. You don't need state legislation. You just need You just need a local community, including the park and recs, to say, this is the model that we want.
Yeah.
We want to preserve our in-town league.
And two things pop into mind. Like number one, organizations that control the facilities have power to make changes if they would use that, right? Hey, this
Yes.
is our field. So if you want to use our fields, you participate in our programs, number one. And number two, like, let's go on to like, hey, these are our fields. So this type of sideline behavior, not going to be okay. Referee abuse, not going to be okay. And yes, we're going to have to staff it. And we're going to have people out there saying, that's it, enough. You're out. You can't
Yeah.
come here anymore.
Yeah.
You want to take your
Yeah.
kid? No problem. You're not a part of this, and this is serious. And I mean, I wish more facilities did that. I'm always stunned by high schools. I go to a high school game and I see horrendous parent behavior from
Mhm.
both sides, home and away. And I'm like, where's the athletic director? Because you just kick them off the property. Like they
Yeah.
couldn't be in the hallways of your school acting like that. So just be like,
Right.
get out of here. You're gone.
I
Should we
know.
have the police remove you or will you leave? And
Yeah.
now everyone knows when you come to my high school, you just keep your mouth shut and watch the game.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right. You know, John, it's called the power of the permit.
it is.
And it is a largely unexercised power that if we want to reform sports on a local level up, create the kind of culture that we want to have. And I live in San Clemente, California. There's no reason San Clemente, California can't use the power of the permit, given that most sports are hosted at municipal fields and at public schools for the public schools and the park and recs to say, if you want to rent our coveted space, especially during these coveted times, then here's what we need from you. It's not just, a check and proof of liability insurance. We want to know your coaches have background checks. We want to know your coaches are trained in this and this. We want to know that you're serving kids in our community,
Mm,
so how many of those kids are scholarshiped? How many of those kids are, what's your pricing structure? And if your pricing structure is a certain way, guess what? We're going to give you a discount, or we're
hmm
going to give you preferred field place. I mean, there are ways for people who wring their hands at like, why can't things, change? Well, guess what? Go talk to your city council. Go talk
hmm
to your local park and recs board. Ask them what conditions do you rent your fields out? You're the landlord. What do you let, who are you letting use your field? Just ask them for that, and then once you have that information, because it's often in a contract, often in some one sheeter that they hand out to prospective renters, then start to argue for what you think makes sense for you locally.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you think, Tom, do you think we can still have systemic change in sports, or is it gonna, I thought maybe COVID might have been the pause button where people go, wow, dinners at home and lots of things change, but it didn't sadly change anything. Like it made people more in a rush when they returned. Um,
Yeah,
do
I
we
do
need
believe
some
it.
top-down crazy thing that's finally going to be like, okay, enough? Can it happen from the bottom up?
It can happen from the bottom up, and the power of the permit is where you start.
Yeah.
They can start any town. Cambridge has done it. There's a county south of Atlanta. I'm going to get the name wrong on it, but it might be Clayton County,
Yeah.
hold to it, that is now using the power of the permit to promote access in sport.
Mm.
Prioritizing I think the rec league teams is what he was saying. Again, you're going to want to check your information on that. But this can be done at a local level. There's
Yeah.
no reason any kind of taxpayer funded facility is really your opportunity to begin to reset sport at the local level. So I think it would be done there. I think from a top-down federal point of view, I think there's some opportunities as well. Um, I think it starts with honestly collecting better data. We monitor this data really, really closely. We know what the national sport participation rate is. We can break it down by 20 different subgroups, everything from gender to income level to English as a second language, kids with disabilities. We know that. And we can break it down state by state. but the data isn't the survey sample isn't so large that you can break it down like on a city by city level.
Mhm.
So Bend, Oregon should know what percentage of children are playing sports in their community
Mhm.
and then broken down by the different subgroups.
Mhm.
So the city council and the park and rec and John O'Sullivan and other folks can say, hey, look, we've got a gap here. We need to improve this. So to me, just that's the role. That's one role, one easy role for the federal government is just collect and distribute more data so local decisions can be made by people who best know their environment. I
And
think
how
that's
cool, like just that national survey that you were talking about before, just inserting a question or two. It's not like we need to commission this whole crazy thing. Like, let's get a good question here and whatever. I mean,
yeah.
it's sad. I've been to too many communities that don't have facilities, and so they limit, right? I mean, Bend is one of them where, when the registration opens for fall sports on June 1st, by June 10th, you can't sign your kid up for fall sports anymore through the park district, right? That to me says, well, we don't have enough fields, but
Hmm.
it's never been a priority in 20 years I've lived here, right? And it's like, wow, why are we capping? If we have this many people who want to participate in sports, we need to figure out a way for them to participate in sports, not say, oh, there's just too many kids.
Right.
Like, and
Right.
like that kind of stuff drives me crazy. What about like I think when I look at it now and we look at the mess of college sports
Yeah.
and NIL and how that trickles down because all these things trickle down, right? The sort of, hey, if we're going to sort our kids at 12 years old, that doesn't just affect 12-year-old sports. That affects 4 years, 5 years younger, so that at 12 I can be selected, right? But like one of the things that I could see, right, we've had changes federally
Mhm.
in university admissions where a lot of universities are dropping legacy admissions and things
Right.
like that. Now, when I
Right.
go to, you know, upper economic level communities, a lot of those parents, they don't need it's not a scholarship.
Hmm.
They want admission
Yep.
into a selective school. And I'm always like, man, if athletes stop getting admission preference,
Oh yeah. Game changer.
would be a game changer. Would you really want to spend $10,000 a year on your daughter's soccer if it's not going to help her get into college?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, look, yeah, those are the two carrots, a college scholarship and preferential admission to selective universities.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, my kid's one of them. My eldest son Cole got into Babson College, which is one of the top several colleges
Yeah.
in the country now
Yeah.
because he was a recruited soccer player.
Yeah.
The coach is able to go to admission and say, can you get this kid in?" They're like, "Yeah, fine."
Yeah.
So, and he did great. He was honors and finance and so I mean, he certainly earned his way, got a great education, took it very seriously, a great young man. But it matters. Parents know this stuff.
Oh yeah.
And they're the ones who are those upper income parents are the ones who are driving the early forming travel teams. They're the
Hmm.
ones who are funding them. They're the ones who are supercharging the environment. They're the ones who the private equity space is really chasing. So yeah, if you get rid of preferential admission to selective or to colleges, yeah, I mean that would be a game changer. I mean, now I went to the University of Florida. I'm not sure they want to build their football team based upon just the kids who get into the school through non-athletic means. So you got some bigger questions there, but I don't know if you need to do this in every sport. Because you look at John, I mean, one of the most healthy forms of sport out there is like club sports in college.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, club sports in college. My wife's cousin Johnny was the captain of the Stanford rugby team.
Hmm.
My Anna's friend Hanako was played on the Yukon club field hockey team. Great experiences for both of them. They
Hmm.
wore the colors, they played on campus. There was some university support, wasn't direct, wasn't scholarship, wasn't preferential admission. They
Right.
all got into the university, they self-formed. Maybe they had a coach, maybe they didn't have a coach. If they had a coach, then they're the ones who helped hire him. They would have a small stipend. If they had to skip a class, because they're got a medical exam or sorry, medical
Practice. Yeah.
degree,
Yeah.
whatever it is, you can
Yeah.
do it. It's a student-owned experience, and people I know who play club sports love it.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes you talk to these D1 athletes or even D3 athletes who are under the grind of a coach trying to get their next contract. It's sometimes a suboptimal experience. So, like, I think there's something about really doubling down on club sports, which don't have the scholarships and don't have the preferential admission. Just really find a way to support and fund those.
Yeah, and I would even stretch it to, and with the caveat of like Division 1 sports, there are amazing coaches and amazing programs, and
Mhm.
as a Division 1 athlete, it was a great experience, and I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Yeah, of
But I
course.
imagine if you did a satisfaction survey of, you know, there's not a lot of college club sport athletes who are like, I regret playing club sports in college. Like they
Correct.
chose, they didn't have to be there. And Division 3 sports are interesting like this as well. Like your son at Babson or whatever. I work with women's lacrosse at Colby College. Now there's a program that's trying to win a national championship and a NESCAC championship and all that. But none of those kids have to be there anymore. They're in school, right? If lacrosse isn't fun, if the environment isn't enjoyable, they could just walk, right?
Yeah,
So as a coach, the coach Karen there, like she's just amazing at like making it a place that you choose to be,
yeah.
right? I get
Hmm.
to play lacrosse at Colby, not I have to play lacrosse at Colby. And I think
Hmm.
that's a really interesting thing as well. And so, I just think, all these things really feed into if we're going to fix the bottom, there has to be some top stuff.
Yeah,
The incentives, the top can change the incentives and then the bottom has to implement it.
absolutely. I mean, and like I said, there is a role for a policy and doesn't have to cost much money. I mean, John, one of the things I think we really need to do, and I mentioned this to Congress, was I think we just need to organize the environment better. We don't even know who's offering youth sports out there. These organizations don't have to register with anybody.
Yeah.
Not the state, not the federal government, not the NGBs, nobody.
Hmm.
So, how do you communicate best practices and hold anybody accountable to any minimum standards out there if nobody has to register anywhere, right? So,
Right.
I think that's one thing we could do. It should be a
National
fairly low
database.
cost thing, a
Yeah.
national database. I mean, put it
Yeah.
with the maybe it's the Center for Safe Sport, maybe it's USADA, and maybe it's some quasi government, but someplace. Just if you're serving kids, if
Mhm.
kids are in your care in a sport environment, gotta let us know about it. Simple. Go register, and then you can begin to set some minimum conditions, and
Yeah.
maybe even offer some benefits. Anybody registered gets a free criminal background check. Like or free abuse training, or both, or
Well,
something.
well, like you said, you were talking about USA Hockey and some of their initiatives, and we talked about the coaching side, but one of their big initiatives when they started their ADM and everything was small-sided games, got rid of national championships, got rid of, checking for 12 and under from a player, and everyone said, "Oh, you're going to ruin the game," and "Oh, small ice," and whatever, and it didn't. And we produced better hockey players and better national teams and better NHL players and more kids, and their retention rates went up. But what you have now, right, is you don't have to be part of USA Hockey to run a hockey league. And so you now have cities, Boston, Chicago, where they're not playing small ice hockey anymore. Even
Right.
though all the benefits, even though this is what's best for kids, and I meet these club directors, they're like, dude, I get it. But if I don't play full ice, they're going to go someplace because someone's going to offer it. And this is, I think, our challenge, right? Is like in America, I'm a capitalist, you're a capitalist.
Mhm.
We want business to solve it, but business is not incentivized to do what's best for kids.
No, and we have to remember business and industry thrives when there are certain guardrails.
Yeah.
Let's just take like the crypto industry. Okay.
Hmm.
There were no rules around crypto. Now we've got some rules around crypto. And what's happening? Crypto's becoming more legitimate and more aligned with, what's happening on Wall Street in the market. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just there's room for setting guardrails. There's room for setting, just organizing the space a little bit. Regulation, appropriate levels of regulation are good.
Yeah.
Excessive regulation, no. But
Right.
a minimal amount of regulation and adherence to minimum standards aligned with simply the human rights of children, to safety, to health, to agency, to the right to play. Um, is only going to lift all boats,
Yeah.
including all boats that are trying to do business in the space.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So here are some guardrails, I mean, so someone once said to me, like, if we realize that, drinking coffee before noon, shortens your life by 10 years, nine coffee shops might say, hey, you know what? We're not opening until noon, and the 10th would go, there's a business opportunity. We're the only coffee shop open at 6 a.m. Right?
Exactly.
And we know that would happen, right? So to think that everyone's going to do right by kids in sports is not, right?
Yeah.
Schools, for the most part, we'd like to think are doing right by kids because, right?
Mhm.
There's
Yeah.
some regulations about what they have to teach, and there's some guardrails, right? They can't just like go do whatever they want. And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
This is not about government takeover of sports at all. I mean, private enterprise is the we're Americans. We are capitalists. This is a marketplace, but the marketplace is going to function better. It's going to serve the consumer better if there are some mandatory registration and minimum conditions around serving kids.
yeah. Amen to that. Well, let me finish with this one. Like, what's your magic wand moment, right? And I hate when people ask me that, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Like, if you could do one thing, and maybe it's something you already talked about, if Tom Ferry tomorrow could go, this is the change, what would be the first thing?
Yeah, I mean, it would be all the stuff I talked about. Data, mandatory registration, using the sports betting money to fund everything from criminal background checks to coaching, etc. And then I think there would just be sort of a shared commitment around telling a story through these mega events that are coming up over the next decade.
Yeah, the
Uh,
Olympics and the World Cups and
yeah,
things like
I
that.
mean,
Yeah.
if the Olympics passes through and it's, 'It's just a $10 billion party, we're not really, it's 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 just going to be a $10 billion party. We want each one of these events to deliver a real legacy, and they can, and they
Yeah.
can. And this is entirely possible. And there are a lot of great people in space who want that to happen. But like, we need to tell a really catalytic story by 2028 and by 2030, which is our 63 by 30 initiative, and 34 with the Salt Lake City Olympics and a couple of World Cups along the way. We've got to leverage this golden decade ahead to really rethink and build a next generation youth sport ecosystem. And John, it can be done. It may be hard to see, but I've been thinking about this for 20 years, as have you. Maybe I'm more of an optimist than a lot of people, but I see how it could be done. I've studied policies of sports systems around the world, and I know how it can be done.
Hmm.
It can be done. We just
Yeah.
need to have the courage to do a few things that I think we can build that Americans in general, red, blue, green, or otherwise, will rally around, and we can achieve all this.
I love that. Tom, how can people who are inspired by this connect with Project Play, connect with sport and society, get on board, bring some of this stuff to their community? What's the best way for them to start bringing this local?
Yeah, I mean that's nice, John. Look, we've got the big Project Play Summit each year. We call it the premier gathering of leaders building healthy kids and communities through sports. That'll be in Boston, May 5th at 6. 750 or so people last year were in Berkeley. It's a room for 2 days that has an incredible amount of energy, and a lot of people meet a lot of people who you gain ideas, you gain insights, you gain opportunities, you gain networking, you sometimes come across funding opportunities. It's this incredible moment to take measure of the state of play and begin to build chart next steps in building healthy kids and communities. So I'd say the summit and then just our website, which is projectplay.org. There's a wealth of resources, almost all of which are free, from data to coaching tools to on and on. stories, solutions, journalism programs of like the Cambridge Youth Soccer that have been breakthrough ideas. We there's an enormous amount of content on the website that I think can be useful to people.
Brilliant. Awesome. Well, we'll put all that in the show notes and everything. Tom, since your book in 2008, I think it was,
Dang, yeah.
and you've been involved in this sport. And what I've loved about your work is really the ability to bring together high level organizations and people and bring attention to this. And your work and advocacy is certainly why Congress decided to have a hearing on it. So it was exciting to sit at the same table with you, and hopefully it's just the first of many. And some of these ideas can, we can get some real champions who can make a difference and have great influence at that level. So, thanks for sharing all that, and thanks for being back on the podcast.
Yeah, and then John, thanks for your advocacy and care and authenticity all these years in digging in. You're truly a treasure and a resource for the space. So keep it going, my man.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for being on the Way Champions. We always appreciate you having you on.
All right, see you, sir.
Thank you all for listening. Again, thanks to my friend Tom Farrey for being on. Projectplay.org is the website. Again, tons and tons of resources there to bring to your community, to get some ideas, to go before your city council and advocate for change. So check it out. Some really great ideas there. I love some of these solutions around using sports betting money, or this idea of the power of the permit that every high school and rec district has to say, if you want to use our facilities, you have to do things a certain way. I just love that. So, yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Thank you to our friends at Sprocket Sports. Thank you to our Patreon podcast champions who support this podcast every single week. Thank you to everyone who's done bulk orders of books and supports our work that way. And again, in the show notes, we do have some spots left in our certification program for June 11th to 14th, 2026 in Colorado. You want to be in a room in the Rocky Mountains with the most incredible coaches and advocates for changing the game in sports. Check it out. Just go to changingthegameproject.com, right in the main menu, WOC certification, and check that out. And hopefully you can join us in Lake George, Colorado in June. All right. But for now, remember, everyone, your influence is not neutral. And just as Tom was just very optimistic about our influence, how we can make system-wide changes, hopefully you can do a little bit in your community and use your influence for good this week. We'll see you again next week, everybody.